Hello, and welcome to Collective Bargaining 101. I'm Nicole Mace, the Associate Director for Legal Services at the Vermont School Boards Association. So, I'm going to say a few things about how the webinar works. I'm joined tonight by Steve Dale, the Executive Director of the VSBA, and Carrie Lamb, our Operations Manager, both providing technical support as we make our way through tonight's program. If you don't have sound currently, please call our office at the number listed on the slide for technical assistance. If you have a microphone built into your computer, you will have the ability to communicate with us. However, everyone at this time is muted. So we plan to have 3 different discussion times during the session. And if you have a comment or something you'd like to raise during those times, please raise your hand, which is located in the control bar on the right side of your screen. And we will call on you. If you have questions as we move through the presentation, please type them in the box under chat questions. All the questions asked tonight will be listed and answered in an email follow-up to all participants. Some questions, particularly those that seem to be common among participants, may be highlighted verbally during the session, and we may ask you to follow up on a question, and we'll unmute you to do that. We're providing a complete unedited video of tonight's presentation in a follow-up email, and then we will be providing an edited version on our website. Because we hope to use an edited version of the video, we urge you to keep your comments and questions during the presentation as general as possible. Discussion of specific collective bargaining situations really isn't appropriate to be including in content on our website. So if you have specific concerns or questions, please contact me directly via phone or email, and my contact information is on a slide at the end of the presentation. Okay, so here's what, and a disclaimer. This webinar is intended to provide you with general guidance and information and should not be relied upon for legal advice. So there are 5 main content areas we're going to cover tonight, and they're listed here on the slide. We're going to set the context for collective bargaining, understand how boards can set conditions for a successful bargaining experience, do an overview of the basics of Vermont's collective bargaining laws and some effective bargaining strategies, and then really importantly want to take some questions and provide information to you folks about resources and supports that are available to boards. So I want to start tonight by setting a bit of a context for collective bargaining in today's schools systems. The fast-paced, dynamic global world of this 21st century is rapidly changing public education systems and the role of the teacher, from classroom presenter to educational coach. And that's something we say a lot. We also talk about the evolution of the education profession. But what do we mean when we say that? So I've got a brief video, and it's actually, we had to edit it because of it wasn't translating well in the webinar format. So you'll have the picture of this gentleman, Barnett Berry, who's the director of the Center for Teaching Quality, who's done a lot of work in the area of envisioning what a 21st century teaching profession looks like. And so you'll hear an audio clip of him discussing that organization's vision for a teaching profession. And so we'll play that now and then have a brief discussion afterwards. Where's my, there it is.
Okay. We need more highly adaptive solutions on how to help a variety of children reach these high standards. There can be no more top-down, one-size-fits-all approach to school reform. My name is Barnett Berry, and I'm the founder and president of the Center for Teaching Quality, a policy research organization that's dedicated to advancing a 21st century results-oriented profession. Waiting to See Man is a powerful film that elicits some very important emotion in all of us about the urgency for change and to serve children in high-need communities. But unfortunately, the film based upon, I believe, the assumption that most people in our public school system now are not doing what needs to be done because they don't care, or they're not motivated, or they're just incapable. And that, I believe, is way, way off the mark. If we're not getting the job done the way it needs to be done, and in many places we're not getting the job done, it's because we don't have a system in place to support well-meaning educators who really want to make a difference. They need more preparation. They need more opportunities to work with each other and to share their practices in a highly accountable way. And they need more time to work with a whole array of other support providers for children, especially in our high-need communities. In the year 2030, we have a very hopeful vision that we believe can be realized, and it's built upon 4 emergent realities. And we call them emergent realities because we're beginning to see bits of them, if you will, beginning to emerge, and they are what we believe must be in place if we're going to have this results-oriented profession. And they include, 1, a new learning ecology for both students and teachers that not only provides a kind of 24/7 just-in-time learning environment for both, but also allow teachers in particular with new tools and new software and new smartphones that we haven't even imagined, a way to account for who's learning, who's not, why, and also help the public understand the kind of ambitious goals that we're trying to achieve. We also believe that as teachers work more in cyberspace, there's going to be a greater need for teachers to work in brick and mortar buildings that have become 24/7 kind of hubs of the community. So we're calling for emergent reality too, that to have teachers working both in and out of cyberspace. We also believe, as our 3rd emergent reality, that more teachers need to work as a team, and we ought to strategically recruit and place teachers according to their strengths and the needs of the children they serve, but also build a profession that makes it much more possible for teachers to kind of move in and out of different positions, in and out of different school districts, in and out of different roles at different points in their career. A much more differentiated career pathway built on the needs of kids. And then finally, to drive it all, is our emergent reality number 4, which is all about teacherpreneurs. Teacherpreneurs are those teachers who are our best classroom practitioners, who teach regularly children, never lose that touch, because they are working with children and serving them on a regular basis, but they have time, space, geography, and reward to spread their expertise, again, in and out of cyberspace. The first thing I would say is find other like-minded colleagues. It is not easy, because I know you're working very, very hard every day to serve the needs of kids in your community, but there are plenty of other teachers who really want something different, and they're beginning to kind of organize themselves, both formally and informally. Find those that actually have the focus that you have, the hopes that you have, the dreams that you have, and begin to learn from each other and to organize. I would also ask teachers to go to their unions and tell them it is time to change dramatically. We want you as union leaders to turn our organizations into much more like professional guilds, where the focus is on teaching and learning, and where the unions themselves can actually help broker these relationships in and out of cyberspace, and to demand excellence, but also support excellence amongst all of us.
Okay, so I apologize for the long pauses throughout that. Those were some title slides during the video. We're going to send a link to the actual video along with the presentation materials. We send in an email following the presentation. But what Mr. Berry spoke about essentially is learning taking place both inside and outside classrooms, inside and outside cyberspace, learning taking place in groups, and that uses technologies to both engage learners and to monitor their progress and keep the community informed of their progress. He also speaks of teacher leaders, those individuals who are visionary, willing to lead, and are motivated and committed to effecting change within their respective schools. This last photo here is of the 2012 Coll1 Foundation Fellows, who are a group of educator leaders spearheading change in schools across Vermont. And it's an annual program that's been happening for a number of years now here in Vermont. These are truly exciting times for the teaching profession. And it's critical that our collective bargaining agreements facilitate and not interfere with this exciting evolution so that we can better meet the anytime, anyplace learning needs of today's students. So as you think about the emerging teaching profession, we urge boards to evaluate their district's collective bargaining agreements to determine whether or not they promote these four things: greater flexibility in teacher availability to students, greater flexibility in methods, scheduling, and location of learning, greater focus on student proficiency and using technology to support student learning, and a focus on differentiated pathways into and within the profession. My guess is we're not going to have a poll on this question tonight. We will have a couple polls in a little bit, but my guess is that in most cases your contracts do not provide for this level of flexibility and differentiation. And I would suggest that you can't get there unless you start thinking about and planning for collective bargaining in a very strategic and relationship-based way. Now more than ever, school boards need to treat negotiating contracts as a central piece of the work they're trying to accomplish on behalf of both students and taxpayers. So for those of you who've come to our essential work trainings, this will be old material, but for those of you who haven't, we at the VSBA have identified 6 essential elements of the work of school boards. And they are to engage the community, create a vision for education, employ a superintendent to lead in achieving the vision, establish policy parameters, adopt a budget to support the vision, and monitor progress toward the vision. The vision is really the guidepost, the North Star for any work a board is going to be doing. And boards have to view collective bargaining as a vehicle to help their districts accomplish their vision. And you have to take steps to clearly link the two. It does no good for a board to articulate a bold, innovative vision and design transformative policies if those elements are in conflict with provisions of your master agreement. So really at the heart of it all is an obligation to negotiate contracts that are aligned with student needs, vision, and community expectations. That all sounds good, but how do you do that? So I want to spend the next few slides reviewing some ways boards can set some conditions for a more successful bargaining experience that clearly links what you're trying to accomplish at the table with your vision for the district. So the first step is to start with a conversation. Boards should be having structured conversations with teachers, students, administrators, parents, and community members, and you should be asking these questions. What do we want for our students? What does that mean for our schools, for the teaching profession? Why is that important to you? And it's also important to be explicit in those conversations about what new directions for your schools might mean for your collective bargaining agreements. These conversations have to happen well in advance of any collective bargaining. They are ongoing, and they help build relationships, trust, and a common understanding about where the district is headed. So once you've had these conversations, you should be able to say with clarity, commitment, and a sense of broad support from all your stakeholders, this is what we want for our students, and this is why. This is your vision. So once boards know where they want to go, they really need to expect and encourage strong leadership from the superintendent to help them get there. As superintendents, and there may be some superintendents here tonight, you need to be prepared to help your boards and negotiating councils understand any barriers associated with the current contract. So what's working in the master agreements? What's standing in the way? What have administrators done to bring teachers along on a particular approach? During negotiations, it's also important for a superintendent to weigh in as different proposals are being discussed, so that boards understand any implications on administration's ability to manage the district to achieve the vision. So vision and leadership are key. And I'm going to say a few words about process here. Typically, collective bargaining is an adversarial process, and in times of change and limited resources, that is particularly true. And an adversarial approach to bargaining in a context of limited resources and change may also result in incremental changes to a contractual relationship. It's just the way the system's designed to work. And that's why it's so important to view bargaining as part of a bigger process of improving educational systems to meet the needs of today's students. Educational innovation will require a culture of shared responsibility and leadership among educators in classrooms, administrative offices, and at the bargaining table. So any separateness of labor and management really should be replaced by a sense of the collective aspect of the work, which is the well-being and academic success of students. Really, this is all about building relationships and a sense of common purpose, work that happens well before the parties sit down at the bargaining table. And if you've done that work ahead of time, then as you prepare to sit at the table, you will be in a much better position to propose a bargaining process that meets these characteristics. So a student-centered, collaborative, evidence-based, flexible, and transparent process. And to do that, you could state that your intention is to develop proposals that are student-centered, evidence-based, and transparent. You can state an intention to evaluate union proposals using those same criteria. You can develop clear and consistent communications to keep the community and the broader community that you've just had these conversations with apprised of both what you're trying to accomplish and the process, always making a link between the board's vision for education and the outcomes you're trying to achieve at the table. I'm not going to say a lot about collaborative bargaining tonight, but I will say that there are some places in Vermont that have seen success with this approach recently, and that there are resources to support a collaborative bargaining process free of charge to districts through the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service. So now we're going to go to that concludes the content on sort of setting a favorable context. And what I'd like to do is run through a couple polls so we can get a sense of where you all are at in relation to what I've just discussed. So Carrie, can you pull up the first poll? It's up. So if you could just click on yes or no and submit, we'll get the responses in just a second. Almost there. Okay, let's close the poll. Last chance. 50-50, so I can't see the results. So 50-50, that's interesting. Half of you have made a clear discussions about what you're trying to accomplish for students at the bargaining table, and half of you haven't. Okay, so let's, well, that's fine, 50-50. So let's go on to the next poll. Carrie? Steve, are you plugged in? Anything to add?
Hi, this is Steve Dale. Hi, this is Steve Dale. Just another voice in the mix here. We should mention to you that we will be trying to have a kind of conversation with the folks on the line here a little bit. So you can begin thinking right now about any experiences you've had that might be helpful to share with the other folks on on the line as we do this next poll.
We're at 38%, 46%. 46%. Anybody else?
Anyone else want to weigh in? We're going to close the poll.
Not that many people, only 62% voted on that one.
I just unplugged mine. 100% expect, encourage strong leadership from your superintendent. Excellent, excellent. But we did have only 62. I just want to assure everyone that the results of this polling are confidential. We have no ability to share them with other people. So, but as Steve mentioned, we'd like to open it up to any comments or experiences folks might want to share related to setting a context for bargaining. So any work that you've done in your own communities, on your own boards, that is really related to engaging the community and vision for student achievement and what that means for your collective bargaining agreements, or other general thoughts related to this content. If you have something you'd like to share, please raise your hand. One hand? No hands?
While we're waiting to see if there's somebody that would like to share an idea or two.
I think you're muted. Can you unmute, Steve? Yes. Okay, sorry.
It's just important to point out that what Nicole is talking about is the fact that we really are entering a pretty radically different time with collective bargaining clearly needing to be a means to an end. Historically, I think collective bargaining has been a very incremental process. We're going to start with the current agreement. We're going to go 1% here, 2% there, 2 minutes there, one minute there. But it's all very incremental, and change takes a long time to be made. And by really starting with what kids need,
You were muted the whole time.
Was I muted that whole time? Okay, I guess I was muted. Sorry about that. Okay, sorry about that. This is a radically different time that we're entering into, and the main point that Nicole was making is that collective bargaining really needs to be a means to an end. Historically, collective bargaining was very much an incremental process, 1% here, 2% there, a minute on some time requirements being added. And we really are entering into a time where transformative change is needed in the arrangement that we have with our staff. So we really are urging boards to start from the perspective of what do kids need, what does education need to look like as we move forward, and then and to engage teachers in that conversation, and then back into the question of then what does the contract need to look like. So we're really happy to be able to have this opportunity for a conversation with you. If you have experiences in your districts that you'd like to share, we'd love to hear from one or two people before we move on to the next section of this webinar. We have a number, there have been some folks that have been responding. If anybody would like to talk, if you have a microphone and you'd like to talk, please raise your hand so we can call on you. We'll try that feature of this webinar. And Carrie is watching carefully to see if there's a hand up. We are getting some comments in the chat panel there. People are raising them as questions. I'll read a couple of them. The atmosphere in a particular district has been all about money, benefits, and some work rules. There's been little talk about what kids need and more about what teachers need. Clearly, that's at the heart of the discussion that we've begun to have here in the last 20 minutes. There was another question raised about the inclusion of teacher and principal evaluation There's been a committee that's been working on that issue for some time. There's an expectation that teacher and principal evaluation will become more prevalent and more routine, and that we will work with that issue. That may well be something that should become part of your bargaining, but that's a pretty complex area that needs additional work. There's another comment here from my point of view. District boards are so very different, and quite different from the high school board to elementary school. How do boards sort out that wide range of issues because the needs are different in each district? Clearly, that is a complex issue that all districts sooner or later have to deal with now that supervisory unions are negotiating contracts collectively. So that requires boards to obviously work together to do some compromising to sort out which schools, how you take into account the needs of a number of varied schools. Should we move on, Nicole, or anybody else want to add? What we'd love to hear is if anybody has had a really exceptional experience having conversations, because there are districts in the state that have gone down this road and that have had exciting conversations with their teachers about what kids need, with what kids need, so that then the contract better reflects moving education forward.
Now, so we're going to have two other opportunities to hear from you. So if something occurs to you in the next half hour or so, file it away for discussion at the next break. Right now I'm going to move into content on Vermont's collective bargaining laws. So I hope you all have a cup of coffee in front of you. The process of collective bargaining is governed by several sources of law. The Labor Relations for Teachers Act, which is in Title 16. This body of law covers licensed teachers and administrators. The other source of law is the Vermont Municipal Labor Relations Act, which is in Title 21. And that act covers all other employees of the school district or supervisory union. And then the final piece is opinions by and decisions by the Vermont Labor Relations Board, which is the agency responsible for administering our collective bargaining statutes. So it's important to note that depending on the type of school district employee involved, you'll be dealing with one of two Vermont Labor Relations Act. And it's also important to know that some provisions of the municipal labor relations law apply to labor relations for teachers. When that occurs in tonight's discussion, I'll flag that for you. So the first question that we need to understand is who's at the table for collective bargaining. And state statute defines the school board party as the school board negotiations council. If you're in a supervisory district, that means it's your school board. But for districts within a supervisory union, this is a body comprised of representatives that each board sends or designates to engage in negotiations with the union. However, final ratification of any agreement under state law remains the sole responsibility of the school board. So the negotiations of the agreement have to be done collectively, but final ratification rests with each member board. The other side of the table is the Teachers Organization Negotiations Council, which is quite a mouthful. That's essentially the body designated by the teachers organization within either the supervisory district or the supervisory union to act as its representative. State law specifically says that school administrators cannot serve as negotiating agents for the teachers organization. So that's who's at the table. Well, when does the bargaining start? Unless you have a contract in your district or region that states that either party can make a request to commence negotiations, the timing under state law can rest entirely with the Teachers Association. And that basically the parameter is that they have to make a request to start negotiations no later than 120 days prior to the earliest annual meeting within the SU. And I did some counting, and it turns out that that means for this year that's today. So if any of you, this assumes that your earliest annual school district meeting is on town meeting day. But for those of you who are going to be bargaining for the coming year, the following school year, you should have received a request to commence negotiations before today. So that's when bargaining starts. What do you have to bargain about? This is the so-called scope of bargaining, and our statute spells out our teachers. I'm speaking mostly about the Teachers Act at this point. That the items for bargaining are salary, related economic conditions of employment, an agency service fee, grievance procedures, and any mutually agreed upon matters not in conflict with state law. The Labor Relations Board has also weighed in on some of these broad terms like related economic conditions of employment, and they've decided that items such as freezing wages, altering the grievance procedure, changing the procedure for taking personal leave, and transferring bargaining unit work to non-bargaining unit employees, those are all elements within the scope of bargaining under the Teachers Act. It's important to know what you have to bargain about, because if you don't have a waiver by either the actual terms of a contract or through negotiations, an employer has a duty to bargain changes in mandatory bargaining subjects during the term of the contract, regardless of the state of negotiations. So that's to say that during the life of a contract, boards and administrators cannot decide to unilaterally impose terms of employment that are within the scope of bargaining.